Hi guys, so we're gonna hopefully finish up chapter 13 today, and we're starting with chapter 13 key issue 3, which is why are urban areas expanding? So first we need to define urban settlements, and several definitions have been created to characterize cities and their suburbs. The term city defines an urban settlement that has been legally incorporated into an independent self-governing unit. In the U.S., these urban settlements are sometimes known as a central city. Okay, so this is the city of St. Louis, and this shows the definitions of St. Louis. So the city of St. Louis comprises only 6% of the land area and 11% of the population of the MSA. And the MSA is the metropolitan statistical area, and we'll talk about that in just one second. So if you look, the red is the city of St. Louis, the orange is the urbanized area, the red circles are the urban clusters, then the kind of dark peach color, that's the metropolitan statistical area, and then the lighter peach, that's the micropolitan statistical area, and then the red outline is the core-based statistical area. Okay, so an urban area consists of a dense core of census tracts, and these are densely settled suburbs and low-density land that links the dense suburbs with the core. The census recognizes two types of urban areas. The first is an urbanized area. Is an urban area with at least 50,000 inhabitants, and the second, an urban cluster, is an urban area with between 2,500 and 50,000 inhabitants. Okay, 3. The U.S. Bureau of the Census has created a method of measuring the functional area of a city known as the Metropolitan Statistical Area, or the MSA. And this includes an urbanized area with a population of at least 50,000, the county within which the city is located, and adjacent counties with a high population density and a large percentage of residents working in the central city's county. Okay, overlapping metropolitan areas. Some adjacent MSAs, and remember MSAs are metropolitan statistical areas. Some adjacent MSAs overlap so that they now form one continuous urban complex. For example, extending north of Boston to south of Washington, D.C., geographer John Gottman named this region Megalopolis. And this is a Greek word meaning great city. So megalopolises are areas that form one continuous urban area. Local government fragmentation. Most U.S. metropolitan areas have a council of government, which is a cooperative agency consisting of various local government representatives. And the purpose may be to do some overall planning for the area that cannot be performed by a single local government. Annexation. This is the process of legally adding land area to a city. Many U.S. cities grew rapidly in the 19th century because they offered better services than available in the rural countryside. For example, water supply, sewage disposal, etc. Density gradient. The U.S. tend to become less and less dense as one ventures farther from the city's center. This phenomenon is known as the density gradient. Okay, let's take a look at this map. Let's see if this map is in our book. Yes, it is. Here it is. Okay, so this shows the annexation in Chicago. During the 19th century, the city of Chicago grew rapidly through annexation of peripheral land. Relatively little land was annexed during the 20th century. The major annexation was on the northwest side, or O'Hare Airport. The inset shows that the city of Chicago covers only a small portion of the Chicago metropolitan statistical area. So if we look at the Chicago metropolitan statistical area here, that's only a tiny bit of Chicago itself. And then if we look at the city limits in 1837, that's the lightest yellow. So this was Chicago in 1837. Then it expanded gradually out here, then out here, then added on these bits, then the darker kind of salmon, then the darker peach. And look here where it annexed O'Hare to have that airfield. And then we see the actual metropolitan service area is just this bit right here. The cost of suburban sprawl. A flattening of the density gradient for a metropolitan area means that its people and services are spread out over a larger area. U.S. suburbs are characterized by sprawl, the progressive spread of development over the landscape. Suburban segregation. The modern residential suburb is segregated in two ways. One, social class. Similarly, I'm trying to look at the camera screen and not at the computer screen, and my eyes just aren't that good. Okay. Similarly priced houses are typically built in close proximity to one another, thus attracting a specific range of income earners. So, housing segregation. This is a gated community. Dana Point, California, a Los Angeles suburb, has a gated community called Lantern Bay. The modern residential suburb is segregated in two ways. The second way is land uses. Residents are separated from commercial and manufacturing activities that are confined to compact, distinct areas. Zoning ordinances enacted in the early 20th century have contributed most notably to the segregation of land uses associated with suburban areas. So something that's interesting, well, it kind of depends how nerdy you are, that's interesting is to notice, drive through neighborhoods and see where different housing types are located. Sometimes you'll notice neighborhoods where there are only one distinct size and type of house, whereas other neighborhoods there you might see older or less well taken care of houses next to very new houses. You might see mobile homes next to very new, clearly like wealthy homes, and those are where zoning ordinances are very different. So generally, where zoning ordinances are very tight, you're not going to see like a mobile home next to a brand new home that is permanent. So that's going to depend on the zoning ordinances in that city or town. Okay, urban transportation. Motor vehicles. Cars and trucks permitted large-scale development of suburbs at greater distances from the city center. Motor vehicles can use a considerable amount of space in U.S. cities, and the average city allocated about 1/4 of its land to roads and parking lots. Multi-lane freeways cut a 23-meter or 75-foot path through the heart of a city, and elaborate interchanges consume even more space. Valuable land in the central city is devoted to parking cars and trucks. The car of the future. Motor vehicles are one of the greatest challenges to reducing pollution in congested urban areas. automakers are scrambling to build alternative fuel vehicles to the market, to bring alternative fuel vehicles to the market. Diesel engines burn fuel more efficiently. Biodiesel fuel can be produced partly with vegetable oils or recycled restaurant grease. Hybrid is energy that would be otherwise wasted when coasting and braking is reduced, because an electric engine takes over during those instances. Ethanol, fuel made by distilling crops such as sugarcane, corn, and soybeans. Critics question whether the amount of energy put into growing the crops is not equal to, if not more than, the amount of energy derived from them as fuel. Plug-in hybrids. Electric motor supplies the power at all speeds. The gas engine can recharge the battery, as well as plugging the car into an electrical outlet. Hydrogen fuel cell. Hydrogen forced through the polymer electrolyte membrane or proton exchange membrane combines with oxygen from the air, producing an electric charge. So here is a car that's plugged in. So I used to drive to work every day when I drove to Boyle, and I would drive behind a car, a little Volt, and the license plate was plug in. I was like, oh, plug in, you're so cute. Okay, so we look at this map. It shows us electricity by U.S. state, dependency on non-renewable and polluting fossil fuels to generate electricity varies widely among states. And it shows us that the source of electricity where states are brown is 75% and above coal. Where states are tan is 50 to 74% coal. Where states are green is 50% and above natural gas. And where states are purple, 50% and above nuclear. Where states are aqua, 50% and above hydroelectric. And where states are gray, no source, 50% or above. And in those cases, a lot of those have a pie graph on them, and it tells what they are. For example, oh, our book looks different than the Texas one on there. Oh, I see. It looks like there's a pie chart missing. Well, if you want to look at it in your book, it's 489. But there are some pie charts missing on the graph, on the map there, on this map here, that are in the book that show a little more detail. They show that Texas has a bit more going on, Oklahoma has a bit more going on, California, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, North Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. All the states that are labeled have pie charts that are more diverse sources of electricity. Okay, public transit. Some benefits of public transit. In larger cities, public transit is better suited than motor vehicles to move large numbers of people, because each transit traveler takes up less space. It's more cost-effective than privately owned vehicles, emits relatively less pollutants than privately operated vehicles, and is more energy efficient than privately operated vehicles. Some limitations are that most people in the U.S. overlook the benefit of public transit because they place higher value on the privacy and flexibility of schedule offered by a car. They're not offered in most U.S. cities. So my friend Louisa, who came to visit us, Louisa, who is from Hungary, always talks about how hard it is to live here because there's just not the public transit that exists in Europe, and that it's really difficult to walk, not only in Lexington, but she lives kind of on the outskirts of Lexington, and that it's just really difficult to walk anywhere, that like the way hedges are kind of built and the way sidewalks are built here, just do not promote walking anywhere. So this picture just shows us transit in Boston. Boston's subway system, known as the T, includes a heavy rail at the top and a light rail at the bottom. Okay, why do cities face challenges? The process of deterioration. So filtering is large houses in older neighborhoods are subdivided. First of all, I want to point out that our PowerPoint did not discuss the picture from where I grew up, so we're just going to go over here and talk about it. So, hold on, let me get the book here. Oh, come here, book. Okay, here's Columbus. Here's where I grew up, Worthington. My dad's office is like right here. And this is where my mom's house used to be. Now my mom lives like somewhere around here-ish. And I can never remember Westland or Eastland, which one. I think Eastland is the one where I took driver's ed. Yes, I took driver's ed at a Sears. I don't know why. They didn't have driver's ed in my school. You guys don't have driver's ed either, but some schools have it. This is Easton. Easton is this amazing mall, but it's like, it's not an inside, well, part of it is inside, but part of it is like this sprawling outside walk around to all the stores mall. And they have an Apple store, and they have American Girl store. It's craziness. It's huge. So there's Abercrombie, and they have a Trader Joe's, and it's the awesomest store in the world. And they have this huge, like you go up this big escalator, and there's a movie theater to the top. Yeah, it's good stuff. So there's Columbus. And okay, so see what it's trying to show you here. See all the malls we have in Columbus? Like, we don't play. If you want to go shopping, come to Columbus. Remember I told you City Center was right in the middle? But now City Center is not there. Oh, and here's Easton. Shops at Worthington Place, Worthington Square, Tuttle, Westland, Eastland, Easton. Oh no, here's Easton right here. Sorry, I read that wrong. There's Polaris. Oh, sorry, I was not showing you. There's Polaris. Polaris is where also you go to see good concerts, just in case you need to know. Okay, back to our notes. Miss Brewer, focus. Okay, filtering. Large houses in older neighborhoods are subdivided into smaller dwellings for low-income families through a process known as filtering. So you'll see a lot of this in downtown Lexington and downtown Louisville. Will there be like a really cool older house, and it will be subdivided into like 4 apartments or 6 apartments. Over time, landlords cease maintaining the properties when they are no longer economically feasible. So I lived in a big house in Lexington when I went to college. It had 2 apartments, and it is now, what's the word when you can no longer live there? Condemned. So if you go look at it now, it has like a big sign on the front that's like, no one can live here. It was a really cool old historic house, but it was not well taken care of. And so people can't live there anymore. Then redlining, we've talked about this a bit before. Some banks engage in redlining. This is drawing lines on a map to identify areas in which they will refuse to loan money to purchase or fix up a house. This is illegal but difficult to enforce because redlining is frequently done on the basis of race or ethnicity, based on who lives in that area. And that's why it is illegal. It's difficult to enforce because a lot of times you can't make a bank loan money to people because they will say, oh, it's not that we are saying we're not going to loan them that money because of where the house is or because of the race or ethnicity of these people. We're not loaning them the money because of their credit history or because of their income or because of their tax records. So they come up with all kinds of different reasons in order to make it look like what they're doing is legal. Public housing. During the mid-20th century, many substandard inner-city houses were demolished and replaced with public housing. This is housing reserved for low-income households, and they must pay 30% of their income for rent. A housing authority established by the local government manages the buildings, and the federal government pays for all expenses not covered by rent. Most of the high-rise public housing projects built in the U.S. and Europe at this time are now considered unsatisfactory for families with children. So sometimes you'll hear of things called the projects, or you'll still hear it called public housing, or you'll hear of like Section 8 or HUD, Housing and Urban Development. You'll hear about people who are on income-based housing. So this is housing that people get based on how much money they receive. And a lot of times, because it is how they talk about it, substandard public housing, these apartments or houses are built kind of in a very like cookie cutter format. So they all look the same. They're very institutional looking. So they're not very pretty. They're not very, what's the word I'm trying to say? They're not individualized, but people pay based on how much money they make, which surprisingly, you know, when I first started teaching, I didn't make very much money at all. And I thought, you know, I looked at one of these places that was based on income, and it would shock you how little money other people make. Because I think when I started teaching, I made like, I want to say like $21,000 or $27,000 or something, which today is so much less than I make. And at the time they were like, yeah, you'd still have to pay this huge amount. And I was like, gee, many Christmas. It's crazy. It's crazy how much families with kiddos make, you know. Okay, so let's see if we can find this picture. I'm guessing it is a building being demolished. Okay, so this shows it says one of the most notorious public housing projects, Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis, was constructed during the 1950s and demolished during the 1970s. Okay, so we've talked a lot about gentrification, but we'll just go over what the book says. Gentrification is the process by which middle-class people move into deteriorated inner-city neighborhoods and renovate the housing. Most U.S. cities have at least one substantially renovated inner-city neighborhood where middle-class people live. Middle-class families are attracted by some of the following: houses that may have more architectural character than those in the suburbs. So you'll notice in these older neighborhoods, there are just some really cool features on older houses. These really neat architectural features that are from generations past. If you walk around old Lexington, you know, old parts of Lexington and old Louisville, there are just some really beautiful houses that people are attracted to. The proximity to cultural and recreational activities. Definitely in downtown Lexington, there are just some really neat things to do, and living near those things in walking distance is nice. And then commuting time is reduced to the CBD. So if you work downtown, or if you like to eat at those restaurants downtown, or if you like to go to a lot of things at Rupp, it's really nice to live down there. So this shows us gentrification kind of taking place. This is New York's Soho neighborhood, and it was gentrified during the late 20th century. The underclass. Inner city residents are frequently referred to as the permanent underclass because they're trapped in an unending cycle of economic and social problems. They suffer from relatively higher rates of unemployment, alcoholism, drug addiction, illiteracy, juvenile delinquency, and crime. Children often attend deteriorated schools. Affordable housing is difficult to secure. They tend to ignore good learning habits, regular school attendance, and completion of homework. The tendencies needed to alleviate oneself out of it, and the tendencies needed, they tend to ignore all these things, which are the tendencies needed to elevate oneself out of the underclass. No wonder I was having trouble with that. Having trouble with punctuation and what the word was. So, inner city residents are trapped as permanent underclass because they live in a culture of poverty, which is characterized by unwed mothers giving birth to 3/4 of the babies in the U.S. inner city neighborhoods, and 3/4 of children in the inner city live with only one parent, and there is a relatively higher usage of drugs. So let's look at urban economic challenges. And the first of those is the eroding tax base. Low-income inner-city residents require public services, but they pay little of the taxes needed to fund the public services. Cities have two choices to close the gap between the cost of operating public services and the funding made available by taxing. They can reduce services, or they can raise tax revenues. And the impact of the recession. The housing market collapse in 2008 was one of the principal causes of the severe recession. Lower assessed values of houses led to lower tax revenues acquired from property taxes. When borrowers cease to pay their mortgages, lenders can take over the property in what is called a foreclosure. So foreclosure is when people just simply cannot or do not pay their mortgage anymore, and they walk away from their house. Okay, so these maps show foreclosures and murders in Houston. The left map is most of the foreclosures were in areas with high percentages of minorities. And the right map shows that most of the murders in Houston occurred in low-income minority areas, and most victims, as well as those arrested for murder in Houston, were minorities. Compare with maps of Houston's social areas. So the first map shows us by zip code. The darkest purple are 50 or more foreclosures. The next lightest purple is 30 to 49 foreclosures. Below that is 20 to 29, then below 20, and then the gray is no data. And then in the right-hand map, each dot is a murder in 2011. Okay, in summary, services, especially public and business services, cluster in the CBD. Some consumer services, especially leisure, are in the CBD. 3 models help to explain where different groups of people live within urban areas. The urban growth has been primarily focused on suburbs that surround older cities. Cities face physical, social, and economic difficulties, but some improvements have also occurred. That's it.